I'm generally known as Pashi. I like this. Are you rolling? Okay,
Okay.
so
So I'm generally known as Pashi, but when I was born, the first name given to me by my maternal grandfather was Madho. Then my family wanted a proper name from the traditional way, so there was the sound P. So I was named as Pradyuman. It was too difficult for some of my members of the family to pronounce. So gradually it became Prakash. So my formal name is Prakash Chandra Kapoor. My paternal aunt used to call me Pash. So Pash became Pashi. So when I finally came to the ashram, mother knew me as Pashi. So that is why I've always preferred the name Pashi from then onward. But my passport name is Prakash Chandra Kapoor. Kapoor is my family surname, which is Kshatriya by caste. I was born in a place which is very close to Islamabad, Rawalpindi. March 1932. I have two birthdays. One is 8th of March, another is 27th of March. 8th of March is what my father wrote down in my school register. 27th of March is what mother said is my real birthday. So I grew up basically in two places. One, Rawalpindi, which is in Punjab and now in Pakistan. And the second one is when my father, who was a medical practitioner, practiced in a small town which was equidistant between Peshawar and Naushara, a place called Pabbi, about 35,000 population. Very well known for a marketplace for wholesale red chilies and cane, sugar cane. But unfortunately, in that town, the educational facilities were not very good. Okay, there was a high school, but from the town you had to walk almost 3 to 4 kilometers. So my mother was very keen that the children should be educated properly. So my father, naturally because of his practice, he had to stay there. So his mother was taking care of him, and my mother shifted to Rawalpindi with her, at that time, 2 children before I was born. Then the third one came along, and I'm the fourth. But unfortunately, the first 2 children, the one who was the first born, a girl, she died in infancy, and the second one died unfortunately when he was about 13, bitten by a poisonous bee into the eye. I was at, I think, about 7-year-old at that time. So from the surviving 7, 4 were boys and 3 were girls. So I'm the second oldest. After me there was a daughter. Then there was a son. He also passed away. Then there was a daughter, another daughter, a son, a daughter, another son. So my mother was in fact productive from 1928 to 1950. Some were born in the home. I was born in a hospital. So my first schooling when I became 5 was in Pabbi, but not in the school, but in a mosque, because mosque was next door to our house. So the first alphabets I learned was A, Alaf, Be, Pe, Te, Urdu. My mother was not happy that I should be learning Quran and things like that. I mean, that was because it was like a madrasa. So then she became permanently resident of Rawalpindi with us, because there my maternal grandfather had a house. So he was a widower. So my daughter became also the householder, and it was convenient for him, and children could go to the school properly. So then I was shifted from Pabbi to Rawalpindi along with my other 2 brothers. So my father used to visit us on weekdays. Saturday, Sunday, sometimes Monday, Tuesday, he'll stay and then go back. So during that period, he admitted me to the nearest junior school when I was 5. So he didn't remember the date that I was born on. So arbitrarily, he fixed 8th of March. Good for me because I have 2 birthdays, like the Queen of England or the King of England. So I did my junior school, then moved to the high school, because junior school used to be till class 4. And from class 5 to class 10, which was called matriculation at that time. So I did it in the high school, where my elder brother who passed away was also there. And he was a brilliant student and very well recorded. So they expected the same from me. It is true that after 6 months of joining my primary school, I became the monitor of my school. And throughout my school career, I was the monitor. So I had some privileges. I could give punishment to the students if they were naughty. I could also give them lessons. And they never allowed me to be second in the class. So these privileges were very useful, but I was also very naughty. So by the time I was in the final year of high school, it was the year 1947. In 1945, when the war ended and Attlee promised India the freedom, at that time they created an interim government headed by Jawaharlal Nehru and Deputy Prime Minister nominated by Muslim League, Liaquat Ali Khan. So it was a very uncertain period, because at that time partition had not been agreed. Idea was to see if we can manage together there will be no need for partition, although Jinnah kept on asking for a Pakistan. There were agitations and so on and so forth. And there were also riots. So their two famous riots were in Bengal, Noakhali, and the other was Rawalpindi massacre. That's 1946. Because the constitution of most of the villages in Punjab was, and in frontier, villagers were mostly Muslims and minority of Hindus and Sikhs who provided the services, shopkeepers, professionals, medicines, and so on and so forth. So these villagers would come early in the morning shouting Pakistan Zindabad and all that, creating a lot of panic in Rawalpindi where we were. So what happened gradually was that Hindus and Sikhs consolidated into areas, Muslims consolidated to other areas. And in the riots, I was again at the right place at the right time because we had two houses, one which we lived in and the second one which we had rented. And that was rented to an inspector of police. So during the riots, when he used to go on rounds where the riots were taking place in villages and all that, I don't know, I persuaded him, few of those trips he will take me also. And what I saw by human eyes was terrible. Gurdwaras were everywhere. Hindu temples were less, but Gurdwaras were everywhere. And Gurdwara was raided, put on fire, and people who had escaped there to save themselves, they butchered and thrown into the wells. And then petrol burned them. I saw it with my own eyes. I can never forget it. Maybe in India we did the same, I don't know. But this was my sad experience. On the other hand, my family was very nationalistic. When I'm telling you about this brother who got bitten by the poisonous bee, he was treated by an England-returned Pathan doctor from Peshawar, whose name was Dr. Khan Sahib. Dr. Khan Sahib happened to be the younger brother of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, the frontier Gandhi. That's how my father got to know the family and became a participant and a donor. So as children we used to go and spend our sometimes a week, sometimes 10 days at Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan's residential home. So we were part of the family. Okay, coming back to this. So then came March of 47. Again riots subsided in 46, 47 again. So then the schools had to close down, all education institutions were closed down. So we had nothing to do. And at that time, the Independence Day and formation of Pakistan was announced. So Pakistan had chosen to celebrate their independence on midnight of 14th, whilst India was to be free on 15th night, midnight. So my father was still in Pabbi, but a classmate of mine, whose brother was in railways and had a pass, was planning to visit Delhi. So he asked me, are you interested in coming to Delhi to see the Independence Day? So I persuaded my mother to let me go. So on 12th of August, we took a train which was in the afternoon for Delhi. So by the time we reached Lahore, it was dusk. And suddenly we found that the engine was detached, which they said is going to the marshalling yard for change and so on and so forth. And train was left without in the marshalling yard. ये खत्म करो. So, round about 7 o'clock, a big crowd shouting Allahu Akbar with swords, with bamboo, all sorts of, attacked the train. Pulling out Hindus, attacking them. Some were wounded, some were killed. So we too hid under a bench. In third class, there were benches. So we hid under that. So somebody spotted and said, there are two boys there. They pulled us out. So I used to wear Pathani dress at that time. And I knew Pushto. So I started speaking in Pushto to them. And I said, I'm a Muslim. So I recited also the Kalma. So I said, my friend is Muhammad Deen. So I introduced him. He is my friend. So they said, all right, put us aside, and they said, we'll check on you later on. By the time they went through the train, it had become very dark, and some of the people were tired. So they said, leave those boys, because we went and hid behind a goods train. So they, instead of searching for us, they went. Okay, Allahu Akbar was over. Engine came, attached to the train, and we got into the train under the dead bodies, injured bodies, and so on and so forth. So train moved slowly to Amritsar. Amritsar is so close to Lahore that if you shout, you can hear it in Amritsar, 10, 12 kilometers. So the news had spread, so there were Hindus and Sikhs waiting on the platform to take care of the Muslims. So somebody said there are two Muslims hiding under the bench, so we were pulled out. Now to prove that I was not a Muslim, I put my trouser down and showed them this tattoo, which was very prominent at that time. I had covered it up. So we escaped. So this was on 12th of night. Then to reach Delhi took us 2 days, because trains were disrupted, the riots all over the place, and so on and so forth. So on 14th we arrived in Delhi. 14th night, because I had a cousin, my aunt's daughter, married to a policeman who was in the railway police. So I was to stay with them. So the night of the 14th, Allahu Akbar started again from all the mosques, because Muslims were very scared. Anyway, the night passed somehow or other, nothing happened. 15 dawn. So I was at the Red Fort in the morning to see Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister, hoist the Indian flag. Having witnessed that, now I had to go back, because I promised my mother that I'll come back. But then now it was Pakistan. There was Pakistani police on the border. I had no visa, no passport. So I was stuck. Now my parents, who had decided to stay back because of properties, because of my father's practice, friends, this, all sorts of consideration. And particularly one of my mother's brother, eldest brother actually, who incidentally was chief electrical engineer in Kyoda salt mines. The only salt mines in the world where you get what they call Himalayan salt. So he persuaded everybody in the family, stay here where you are, a few days it will pass and everything will be normal. But things started getting from bad to worst. Now, it so happened that my mother's family and my mother are domiciled Kashmiris. So whilst Hari Singh, Dr. Karan Singh's father, was a king and had declared it as an independent state, domiciled or Kashmiris could freely go. So they all hired a bus, about 20 or 25 of them, or 30 with children and everybody, a little bit of baggage, landed up in Srinagar, waiting for things to settle down, and they'll come back. But unfortunately, the things didn't settle down. Pakistan initiated a raid on Kashmir, which was mixed by the Pathan tribals, but many of the soldiers not in uniform. So that is when Hari Singh got worried. He approached Nehru. So he says the only condition you can accede to India is if all political parties of Kashmir also agree. Because he had initiated a democratic rule in 1946, but funnily enough, he was not allowed in Kashmir. So his friend Sheikh Abdullah became the Prime Minister of Kashmir. At that time, he was the Prime Minister. And they had a constituent assembly. So the constituent assembly had to pass a resolution before Nehru will accept that. So that was done in a hurry with certain conditions which also included 370. And as soon as that was, come.
Should we pause for a moment so you can
Okay,
read yourself?
if you can.
Can we pause? How's the sound? Yeah, sound good? Yeah, it's rolling.
The Indian army was flown to Srinagar just in the nick of time because they were 2 kilometers from the Srinagar airport. The first flush of Indian soldiers were massacred. But plane after plane landed. So gradually they started taking control, started pushing them back. Finally, they pushed them back far enough to what is now called POK, Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. So at that time, Sheikh Abdullah decided that the people who had come from Punjab, it's better that they are, most of them are Hindus and Sikhs. If they want to go to India, so these planes can take them, which Nehru agreed. So one fine morning in October, because my elder brother also had managed to come to India by walking, by taking rides and so on. So when he discovered I was alive, because my family had thought that I was dead. So we both used to, because this plane started coming with refugees, so we started going to the airport every day, hoping that our parents will come. So one fine morning in October, we see them trotting over the. And because the planes had to bring the human beings, if they had any luggage, they were not allowed. My mother being wise and my father being not caring, so whatever money he used to bring, my mother, instead of putting in the bank, she used to put in a safety box. So when leaving Rawalpindi, she stitched a belt and filled it up with the notes. I don't know how much money was there, but so that was the saving grace when they landed in Delhi. So my elder brother's mother-in-law's parents were domiciled in Delhi. Delhi Shadra. So the family moved there. So they found us a little house which we could afford. And we settled down in Delhi Shadra. And then I completed my matriculation privately. My brother was not married at that time, he was engaged, because that's a story in itself. But my would-be sister-in-law was studying in Dehradun in an Kanya Gurukul. So my sister also, younger sister, one of them, also was admitted to that Gurukul before the partition. So I was very keen to study further in Dehradun, to do my intermediate and then the degree, because at that time in the college you did the intermediate, now you do 2+, and then you do the degree course of 3 years, but this used to be 5 years course, a 4 years course. Okay. So my brother, in the meanwhile, before leaving Pakistan, had already graduated, and he wanted to follow the parental profession. He wanted to become a doctor. And he had an admission into a medical college in Amritsar. But by the time we reached Delhi, that possibility had finished, and my brother decided that family needed support, so he will work rather than study. So he joined railways because of my maternal grandfather, my uncle. You saw his picture. So my mother somehow persuaded my brother, said, let one of us be educated. So I went to Dehradun, got admitted into a DAV college, so that I could see my sister and would-be sister-in-law regularly. So I was 2 years in Dehradun. got into a company which wasn't ideal, learned how to smoke, how to drink. But at the same time, I managed to keep up with the studies. So my parents then found they could not support my education anymore. So I came back to Delhi. Now something to be done. So during that period, by the way, when I was in college, being son of a congressman, active congressman, I had also tendencies toward politics. So few of us got together and we became founding fathers of a young socialist league. And Acharya Narendra Dev, who was a very strong socialist at that time, and colleague of Jayaprakash Naik, became our mentor. There used to be a weekly magazine published from Bombay called Blitz. So Blitz became our mouthpiece. So I was a socialist. So then when I came back to Delhi, my father had some money invested with his cousins into a sawmill. So I was asked to work in the sawmill. To save one man's wages, I was the one, because the skilled one who pulls the log and you hold the other side when it is being sawed. So I was that called kecha. So my uniform used to be a loose underwear and a undershirt. Face and everything covered with dust, sawdust. So one day, some friends of my college visited me and asked me to meet me because they didn't recognize me. Anyway, but at that time, there was the Communist Party of India's office in that area called Pulbangash. So I started visiting there in the evenings to read something and all that. And then I applied to become a formal member. So I was member, card holder, communist at the age of 18. And I started creating problems for DCM, Delhi Cloth Mill. I organized the first strike. In between came the first elections. Had I been 21, I would have fought the elections. But being underage, I supported another communist. And all my time was spent on taking care of this, that, and other things. And I became a regular member of meetings in Communist Party. So Shadra area was allotted to me, where a lot of factories were there. So one day, the seniors of the Communist Party, I heard them talking about going to the Russian embassy. So curiously, I asked, why are you going to Russia? Calm, we have some work. can I come with you? So we went up in Russian embassy and I was asked to sit somewhere and they went for their own conversation with the Russians. Came back very happy, very cheerful. So what happened? I said, they've got a grant. Now there was a nationalist in me that could swallow this because I asked more questions and they say, shut up. Okay, I resigned. Also that sawmill did go very well. I was jobless again. Then I met somebody who said, look, there's a good possibility of doing business because these steel scales for engineering, I know somebody who has the technology to make them. And it's not very expensive. It costs only about 1,500 or something. Are you willing to come with me? Okay. I asked my mother if she can spare 750 rupees. We became partners. So this was from a negative, you took a positive on the steel scale and all that. So we made the first batch of 12-inch scale. So I went as a salesman to sell it to the hardware shops and whatever. So the first shop I went to, son, you're a refugee, sit out. Yes. You know, you've been taken for a ride. These are not scales to the scale. He got a scale from his own stock, showed me there was a difference. He says, before you are caught for cheating, better not do it anymore. So this business, the same day, then I met another person. You can call a kind of a friend because you were gossiping and so on and so forth. So what he used to do was take hardware items from Delhi and sell between Delhi and Calcutta on different small towns. Go through the train. And he was wearing good clothes, he was having a nice life. So he told me, yes, I make a decent enough money. You want to come? I'll show you. So he introduced me to that trade. For 6 months I was doing that. Not going to Calcutta exactly, but returning on the midway. In that, what I included also was the barber's blade, shaving blade, and barber's kits, hardware items, locks, you name a thing and all that. So there was some money. At that time, my uncle, maternal uncle from Bombay, came to Delhi because one of my sisters was to be married. So what are you doing? I told him nothing. Would you like to come to Bombay? Because there's a friend of mine who sells components of radio. He and his son are doing that very well. They need a helping hand. My mother, my father were very happy that one person less. So my uncle at that time was superintendent of this railway powerhouse near Kalyan. And I had to commute from this place to Bombay Central to go to the market where this radio. And somewhere that fellow had promised my uncle that if he's doing good, we'll take him as a junior partner. So they will give me lunch also. My train ticket they will pay for. And my salary was 150 rupees. In Bombay again, I met some of my college friends who would come here to join the Bollywood. Somebody wanted to be a writer, somebody wanted to be a director, somebody wanted to be an actor. And they were all clustered in Juhu. Cheap accommodation in Juhu Beach and all that. So I started meeting with them. On this side, I saw that these fellows were only making me work. There was no intention that they'll ever give me any partnership or anything more. And demanding from me more and more. So without telling my uncle, I joined my friends. I'll go in the morning regularly, but instead of going to the place, I'll go to Juhu and we'll get together, and what we'll do, at Dadar Bridge, we used to sell anything that came. From belts, from goggles, to suit lengths, and we'll share whatever we made. But I got caught because one of those days my uncle's friend visited my uncle and he said, I have not seen Pashi for a number of weeks. So when I came home, I was questioned, reprimanded also, but I admitted that this is. So then my uncle thought, would you like to become a mechanic? Why not? So at that time, the powerhouse was going through expansion. So they had two British companies providing the equipment. Boilers were being provided by International Combustion, and steam turbines were being provided by a company called Bellis and Markham. So he spoke to the engineer in charge of Bellis and Markham. So my nephew is keen to become, so if you could help him. So Dennis Freeman, who was in charge of the project, took me on. So my career as a mechanic began. Filing, this, that, little works. So during that period, the managing director of the company and the secretary of the company landed up there. So when they are passing, they saw me filing. And my hand was doing like this. So the managing director comes, lad, this is not the way to file. Give me the file, I'll show you. So he takes the file and shows me. He says, do it. Okay. You should not go up and down. So then he asked Dennis, who is this young man? He says, he's Malhotra's nephew. So that was a positive point for them. So in discussions, they say, we like your nephew. Can we train him in England? Well, what could my uncle say? Because so therefore, and there was another young man also with me who was working for that company in India, whose father was working as a clerk. So he was also doing the same thing. Name was Kalyan Banerjee. So both of us were selected to the apprenticeship course of England. Okay. So January 1954, I land up in England. I think South Pole was the port. From there I came to London because in London there was a cousin of mine living there, married. And I had to go to Birmingham. So my cousin arranged for me to stay for a night or two. And then I took a train to Birmingham. Things were organized. I started my apprenticeship. And the company was very kind. They gave me a weekly wage of 7 guineas. That is £7 7 shillings. Where the normal apprentice was paid £2.5 because they live with their families and all that. And an average skilled worker was picking up between 8 to 9 pounds. So it was a decent wage. And I was fixed in a digs. And joined the night school. After the night school, when they found my results were good, they agreed to give me the possibility of doing a sandwich course. So I went to Birmingham Tech. So finally I got a diploma, not a degree because I was an apprentice, but a diploma which could get me the membership of Institute of Engineers, except for 2 subjects. English and general knowledge. So I was preparing for that. But in the meanwhile, in England also, the Communist Party would not leave me alone because some of the professors and others in Cambridge and Oxford and all that were leftists. So I was being invited to their parties and so on and so forth. On the other hand, I was also talking to young people who belong to conservative party, where I learned a lot about India myself, I didn't know. At the same time, I was quite active in the Indian community because a lot of Indian workers were being exploited at that time. So we used to go and persuade them to learn English, to at least able to read and write, all sorts of things we do. And then you also meet the Indians settled there who have become British subjects and so on and so forth. And amongst them was a doctor. Name was Dr. Swani, Punjabi. Good. So they encouraged me to socialize with them. Every now and then they'll invite me home to them. And they then introduced me to their niece who had just come from India. So being socially active, 15th of August 1955, I had organized a program with a very famous Indian Kathakali dancer. I wanted the fillers. So they suggested she sings very well. I audited her and then I was not very happy. I managed that. But somehow or the other, I knew that I wanted her to be my wife. So when they came, uncle, auntie, and she was to be with them, I made sure that they sit in the front row next to the Lord Mayor of Birmingham. And told my friends, so coming, she's your bhabhi, remember that. In the interval, I come out to see my would-be wife, and she's happily chatting with a young man, very handsome young man. So that is cheating because she's come with a boyfriend. So I say hello, and walk away. When the show is over, her aunt asked me, why was you so abrupt? I mean, you didn't even wait to meet her. I said, what is the use? She comes with a boyfriend. You stupid, he is my son, cousin, her cousin. Then I was later on invited for dinner and introduced properly, and then we started dating. She was not 21 yet, so we waited till she was 21, and then we got married. So my company were upset because now they had to pay for my wife also. So I said, don't pay for my wife, I'll pay. Okay. In the meanwhile, there was a youth festival in Moscow. I was invited as ex-member of CPI. So choice was between marriage and going to Moscow, so I chose to be married to come home. So we got married on 21st of September, that is tomorrow is our wedding anniversary. 66. And then we sailed for India, came to Mumbai, where she was introduced to my family. My parents were there, my uncle's family, and everybody was there. And I was given a duty to go to Sholapur to repair a steam turbine. So when I reached Rawalpindi, it was a cotton factory, and this was the main drive. I think 2,000 horsepower or something like that. And what I discovered was that this steam turbine was perhaps designed even before my grandfather. I had no knowledge of it, because this was specially built steam turbines where at a low pressure you took some of the steam for the process and for high pressure to generate electricity. And in the factory, I'd never seen one. No, I'm landed with it. And the cotton mill had an Englishman as manager. At my head, I wanted urgently repaired. I have this loss or this loss. So I corresponded with home company, also with our head office in Calcutta. With instructions. In 3 days, I managed to repair that. But 3 days in which I did not sleep even an hour. So finally, the manager of the factory wrote to my company in Calcutta, giving me the best remarks. We have never seen anybody like him before, so dedicated. So my flag went up. So she went back with her parents. They were at that time, I think, in Jaipur. My father-in-law was posted there. He was also in railways. And I went to Calcutta, looking for a place to live. Initially, there was a friend of mine who I met in England, so I stayed with him, then found a place and invited her. And I started working as a maintenance engineer. Gradually, they saw my work. By the way, my salary was 450 rupees at that time. So they made me in charge of the mechanics. So I became in charge of the services for. And then I think Dennis Freeman, who was also the manager of the local office, having been to England, speaking English and so on and so forth, he started giving me work also, office work. And gradually, within a year, I was also given a secretary. And I became in charge of the maintenance department with engineers and everybody. So I became sales and service. Then somebody who was in charge of electrical department in the company was an Anglo-Indian who decided to go to Australia. So electrical department was also put under me. And at that time, Ballas and Markham company had only an office with a future collaborator, but they were still using the name Ballas and Markham. The company's name was Steam and Mining Company Private Limited. Where there were 3 offices: Steam and Mining, Ballas and Markham, and International Combustion. International Combustion was headed by a Welshman called Ewington, Ballas and Markham by Dennis Freeman, and Steam and Mining by Kailash Prasad Bhargava. When they decided that Ballas and Markham should start manufacturing in India. Now, the history of Ballas and Markham briefly is that this company was formed in 1852 by two chums engineers. One was Ballas, the other was Markham, to make the first commercial steam engine in the world.
Oh my goodness.
They were the ones who produced the commercial steam engine. And then marine steam engines. They were all over the world. Till the steam turbines came, and then the diesel engine came and all that. So the company started improving, but both families were still associated with the company when I was with them. The then Ballas was the chief designer, and the then Markham was the managing director. Okay. So they decided to form a company, Ballas and Markham India Limited. And as I mentioned to you earlier, Dennis Freeman by that time had taken to the booze, had become an alcoholic, and married an Anglonian. So the entire responsibility of running Ballas and Markham portion of that business fell on me. So I got the company registered. Government of India's approval for 60% in the hands of the English company and 40% in Indian, that is KP Bhargava. Where norm was 51 to 49, Indian 50. Because of, okay, I made friends. So somehow or the other, the Home Office heard about Dennis. So the secretary of the company came to take him back to England for treatment. So temporarily, I was made in charge. So after 6 months when he came back, I had already negotiated the land for the factory, identified the builder for the factory. All things were ready. So Dennis, for a month or so, he was all right, and then he went back to the same old story. So I think Bhargava, I am not sure, but he reported that Dennis is not capable. This time the managing director and the secretary came, made me chief executive and alternate director on the board of the company for the managing director. So all this happened between 57 and 5960. From a mechanic to the chief executive and a director in 3 to 4 years. Now this meant that I had to be part and parcel of the British gang heading a British company. "29, 30, with a young wife, 2 children. He was just born in 1960. Socially, it was not acceptable to them. They called me upstart. The news went home. one of the, well, actually it's our managing director who came. Pashi, this is the problem. Temporarily, can we find a solution? Or you can find a solution. Why don't you find somebody who's retiring British and wants to spend a year or so to at least do the social circle? So I interviewed a man from Bombay, Welshman actually. But he wanted to stay in Bombay. So no go. Then came a suggestion. Your friend Frank Aldridge is just returning home from Australia and he'll be very happy to assist you. Would you accept him? Now, Frank Aldridge, I knew. He also was at my wedding. And in England, we were very friendly. So I said, yes, I have no problem. He will only take care of the factory. You will remain in charge of the administration and everything. Nothing writing, but... So, Frank Aldridge with his new wife and a little baby girl arrives. So I throw a party for him in O'Brien Grand. Invite all those who are head of the organizations, British companies in Calcutta, which was a mixture of English, Irish, Welsh, Scottish, some Indians, plus my staff. I think there's 60 or 70 people. So you have seen the pictures. So, by that time, we took a separate office from Steam and Mining on Park Street itself in Calcutta. So, Frank, this is your room, this is my room. Worked happily. So, one evening, sitting in Saturday Club, having a drink and a meal together, my wife says, since we have come back from England, we have not had a holiday. So, come on, you go on holiday, 1 month you're off. I'll take care of it, don't worry. Go. So we go to Nainital. Come back. I think we arrived on Friday night. Saturday morning, I go to the office and I find Frank sitting in my room because it had a smaller room and a larger room. In the smaller room, the secretary sat. So Vivia, my secretary, was sitting there. She was happy to see me. So she points. Okay, Frank, I'm back, so I can start from Monday. In the meanwhile, will you please go back to your room? So I said, no, Pashi, I like it better here. You can take my room. So we walk together, and I see the chief service engineer sitting there. He says he will sit there with you. I said, Frank, how have the roles been reversed? Your responsibility is the factory, not the office. He shows me a piece of paper that he's been appointed managing director. I said, Frank, I never applied for the job. I don't know how to resign. Would you draft a letter of resignation? Looks at me. No, you can't live like that. I said, none of your bloody business. You do it. He drafts a letter of resignation. I asked Vivian to type it, sign it. He telephones the local chairman, also an Englishman. He was managing director at a tea company. Because we used to play golf in the morning. So I go, well, when I'm leaving there after this, I said, can the car drop me or I have to call for a taxi? So the driver. So he calls me, Pashi, this is what I've heard you resigned. Why? He's here only temporarily. Finally, it is your company. I said, you say so, but I don't think it is true. Can we have a game of golf tomorrow? Let's talk over it. So it's Sunday. So I said, you play 9 or 18? He says, if you are inclined, 18, but if not, let's play 9. I said, 9 will be convenient. Okay. So we meet at the Calcutta Golf Club. Any bets? Normally you used to. So I said, this time the bet is this. If you win, I do what you want me to do. If I win, you accept my resignation. Okay. Few words of wisdom were spoken by him. Don't be stupid and so on and so forth. You are still young. You have this, that is okay. That day I made sure that he loses. Because normally you play with the boss to lose. Are you sure? Yes, absolutely. So my resignation is accepted. The next week I spent looking at the newspaper and vacancies. So there's a vacancy in an engineering company for a sales manager. So I sent my application. I received a call from the managing director of that company, Vishwanathan, and the company is Marshall Sons and Company. Pashi, I have an application in the name of Prakash Chandra Kapoor. Is that you? I said, yes. What happened? That's not a problem. I have applied. Can I help? Because I had given them the sales agency in Maharashtra because of my friend Sharad, who was working with them, and he was manager Bombay at that time. So I said, no. He said, how can I offer you a sales manager job? We have an equal ranking. I said, I applied not knowing that I'm applying to your company. If I don't mind, why should you? Okay. So we met in Calcutta Club for a so-called formal interview. And I was given an appointment letter. So 1 week I was without job. The next week I was in Marshall's. I think at that time my salary was something like 12,500 rupees. And plus, there were perks. Free house, khansama, cook, masalchi, cook's helper, gardener, car and a driver. So overnight something totally different happened. So this happened in 1966. And now since I was able to afford better life, I wanted my two children to be educated in an institution which gave values to them. So I'd heard of Rishi Valley, which was founded by J. Krishnamurti. And when in Marshalls, besides being eventually being named branch manager, I was also responsible for the two factories in Calcutta and one factory in Chennai. Because factory in Chennai was making the road construction machinery. So I used to visit quite frequently to Chennai. And whenever Jadu Krishnamurti was in town, I used to attend his lectures. So I was very impressed by his. And also I discovered that my two cousins had been admitted by maternal uncle of Bombay into Rishi Valley. So when I used to meet them, their way of behavior and all that was very impressive, very simple. They'll recite some kind of mantra before taking the food, having a bath before sitting down for breakfast, all sorts of things. So I came to Chennai and told Sharad, who was my colleague, that I want to go to Mandapalli to get my sons admitted there. And I had written to J. Krishnamurti earlier that I would like to come and visit when you are in town, so that I want to have a course of discussions with you. So Sharad, who was devotee of ashram, I didn't know. So he told me, he said, why do you want to go so far? Now this was 1968, April. There's an institution as good closer, and I'll be able to look after your children. So he drove me to Pondicherry. First time I heard of Shri Avindanda Mother, and whom I am introduced to Kirit Joshi, who is the in charge of the ashram school. So I said, I have two children. One is 8, another is 10. And I would like them to be admitted in the school. So can you tell me something about your curriculum and all that? So he says, go and have a look around for yourself. So then I wait for somebody to come and guide me, and he said, why are you waiting? I said, somebody should show me around. No, go and see it for yourself, there's no problem. So I walked from corridor to corridor, peeping into one room, another room. 8, 10, 12 children in each room, no more. Having been educated in schools where the class was made of 50, 60 students, that was something very strange to me. And then somewhere the teacher is talking, somewhere the students are asking questions, somewhere they're sitting quietly and working. And what again was little different from the normal, that they were addressing the teacher as a bhai or didi. Hemant bhai, Uma didi, very familiar. Finally, I picked up the courage to sit down in a classroom at the back seat where students were just busy doing something and teacher was sitting on table reading something. And suddenly one student got up and asked a question. To my surprise, the teacher says, I don't know the answer. Shall we go to the library to find out? For me, it was more than enough to justify that that is the kind of school. Then I was asked to go and see the facilities, came back. So I said, I like what I see, I would like my children to be admitted. So he pulled out 2 forms and gave it to me. So I said, what is the fee like? He says, there's no fee. But if they are coming in the hostel, it will be 150 rupees per person, per month. Is there any donation I have to give? No donation. Sir, can you explain to me why thousands of parents are not lined up to get their children into this school? Who decides which child to take and which child not to take? Then came the shocking news, mother decides. I look at the back of his chair, there's picture of the mother and Shia Bindu. So I said, you mean that lady? Cynical smile and he nods his head. So I said, you don't mind saying so, but you are old enough, you are running the institution and she has to decide. Well, he said, this is it. So can I meet her? She gives 4 audiences publicly a year. I thought I have come to the madhouse. Okay, thank you very much. So my question and answers upset Sharad, my friend. So he's become angry and angry. Then he wants to go to the Samadhi to do the pranam. So I said, you do it, I wait outside. Then just to appease him, I said, is there something that I can read? So he takes me to the Sabda. So I asked the person behind the counter, what do you recommend that gives me the idea of what exactly this ashram is? He mentioned 2, 3 names, including Life Divine. The name sounded very attractive. So I said, all right, I'll have a copy of Life Divine. It's in 3 parts. I said, I'll buy 3 parts. Wrap it up, paid. And then he says, You know, most of the people find Sri Aurobindo's language very difficult. So can I suggest something simpler to you to begin with? I said, no, thank you. I know English well enough. Thank you. So we depart for Chennai. Sharad is so upset. By the time we reached near the airport, he asked the driver to stop the car and asked me to get out. But my luggage is at your place. The 5 hours to the plane, I'll send it back to you. So I go to the airport, buy the ticket, sit down to read Life Divine. Nothing else to read. Rajan, I don't know, but I read it like a novel. Maybe I did not understand the meaning of a particular line, but it was making sense to me. So logical. How can be an illogical approach of this gentleman that I met this morning? Okay. So I get back to Calcutta that night. From next day onward, I start looking for people who are connected with ashram. So I found that Sri Aurobindo Society had a branch and people used to meet there and talk. So I met one of the devotees. First, he would not give me a lift. He turned out to be Sharad's friend. Gopal Bhattacharya. So finally I persuaded him to get me an appointment with the mother because I have some question to ask. And I agreed to pay for his ticket to come with me. So in June, we flew back to Chennai and then to Pondicherry. Day before our appointment. And funnily enough, the appointment was for 7:20 in the morning. So Gopal had a bath, dressed up, went to the ashram, Samadhi, and came back, woke me up, brought a bouquet of flowers, got me ready, gave me a bouquet of flowers. So I said, why a bouquet of flowers? I have a notebook, I want to ask questions. Now, mother likes flowers. So I took one rose with a stem. This is enough, I'll offer it to her. So 7:20, I was in her presence. She looks up, her eyes are locked. From that moment, I don't know how long it took. But when I came back to my senses, I had my head in her lap and she was stroking it. And then I looked up, our eyes locked again. I don't know for how long. Then when she closed eyes, broke the connection. I stood up and did the pranam in her feet. And suddenly I was crying. Just ran back from her room, downstairs where the meditation hall. I don't know how long. but it took some time before, because what happened to me, I still don't know. But it was a complete surrender to her. And then Gopal took me to Navjatji, who was the chairman of Sri Aurovinda Society and also the promoter of Auroville. There I was shown the brochures of Auroville. I immediately felt that this is something that maybe I've always wanted to help with. I offered as a volunteer to help. So this was my beginning of relationship with the ashram, Auroville and the mother.
Any pulse? Sure.
So you will ask the question.
So, that was your first interaction with the mother. What were some of your subsequent interactions with the mother?
You see, my first interaction with the mother was actually in 1969. Because after having met her, I offered to become a volunteer and to do anything possible from Calcutta. So at that time, Bharat Niwas had been designed and ready to be constructed. And the construction steel was under quota because there's shortage. And there was a committee in Calcutta made up of the steel manufacturers, headed by Tatas. So I was asked to, if I could help. Now it so happened that in the street I lived on one side of the street, and the other side of the street was the Tata's office. And also I had friends, and one of those was in the committee. So this was my first assignment through Sri Aurovinda Society, Navjat. Then as I became more familiar to them, and I was coming frequently, virtually every month, one excuse as the other, I was given also the responsibility to pick up donations that Navjat would organize and telephone me to collect the money from so and so. So I'll bring that also. Then the third thing that I got involved in was that Bharat Niwas was supposed to have state pavilions funded by the various Indian states. So I got involved with a small group of people from Bengal, from Orissa, from Bihar and from Assam to initiate with the governments the financial support. So this moving about gave me an opportunity also to understand that there were many groups who were registered as societies or something like that, associated with the ashram, with their head offices in ashram, Pondicherry, like Mother Society and the World Union and so on and so forth. And each one was having a rivalry with the others in raising funds. But every time, the number one horse was Sri Aurovinda Society. because it had a Marwadi backup. And this is why mother gave Navjat the responsibility for Auroville. So there were rivalries. And in many of the states, mother had even made some what you call reconciliation committees so that they could work together. So this prompted me to come up with an idea that each one of these activities should have the freedom to raise funds, keep 50% for their own use, 50% they send to Pondicherry, where 25% goes to the ashram, 25% goes to the Auroville. So this idea, I put it down on a piece of paper, gave it to Nava, who delivered it to the mother. Mother, being very pragmatic at the same time, she saw the practicality of it and asked Nava to send for me. So this was the first direct audience and work allotment from the mother. So she wanted to know from me, what shall we call it? So I said, Auroville service, because I was only Auroville and not ashram, to be honest with you. She asked for a paper, A3 paper, and wrote Auro service. So I became, from the society's side, founder director of Auro service. So this gave me another title and another possibility. I could travel. Wherever I traveled, I carried Auro service with me. So this happened in 1970. From then onward, virtually every month I was coming here with a report, and invariably I went with Nava to report to the mother. Then came 71. In the period, I also requested mother to make me a Aurovillian. Every time I came, I will say, Mother, when can I become an Aurovillian? And she says, we shall see. In the meanwhile, my interest was increasing in this direction. And I felt that perhaps my wife is not happy with this move, so mother has. So I sent her here. She stayed on to the extent she would not want to go back. Anyway, in that period, 71, she had taken charge of the society's guest house, the one on the beach. So at that time, I asked her to ask mother if children can be admitted in the ashram school. So mother said, they are meant for Auroville, not ashram school. The moment I heard the word, I brought them here, took them away from school. I didn't wait for even school leaving certificates. So both of them were admitted into Auroville. And Auroville was just starting education. In 68, when during my travels to Pondicherry, at the airport, Sharad, who had come to receive me, he pointed out, he said, that's the chief architect of Auroville, Roche. I think he was coming from Bombay. So I went up to him, introduced myself, and that is how I met Roger in 1968. And then as I came here every time, I'll spend some time with him. So more and more we became closer, more and more I get involved in the planning and development of Auroville. So in fact I became part and parcel of L'avenir d'Auroville, or Auroville's future. That was the name given by the mother to the department. So because we were spending time together, there were times also that we will gossip. And then one day I asked Roger how he had come to become the chief architect. So it appears that he had fallen in love with a lady who happened to be the mother's granddaughter. She was already married, but he was so mad in love that he persuaded to divorce her husband and marry him. And she had a child already from the previous husband. And for honeymoon, they decided to come to India because at that time, Chandigarh was being built, designed by Le Corbusier. And Le Corbusier was his friend and also a rival. So whilst doing the normal tour of Agra and Jaipur and so on and so forth, so they decided to visit Chandigarh, Le Corbusier. So on their way back, when they were leaving for Paris, the wife says, I wish we had a time to see my grandmother. So he says, if your grandfather lives in India, why did you tell me before? Anyway, he was rich enough to cancel the ticket and instead came to Pondicherry. He was shocked when he saw who the mother was, our grandmother. A deity, a guru, people worshipping her. So when his wife introduced him to the mother, what do you do for a living? I'm an architect. And mother was told that he's been to Chandigarh to see Le Corbusier. So what do you think of Chandigarh? The right kind of a city in the wrong place. Will you be interested if I give you a city to build? Well, that's my profession, for sure. 1963, I think it was. So that communication started with the mother and Roger on the city part of it.
Was it 24 March 1965? Was he offered the commission on his birthday?
It was, then he was asked to formally accept by the mother, and he replied on his birthday, 24th of March 1965, accepting the assignment. And he gave the offer for fees and so on and so forth, everything. So mother gave the paper to Navjat. He's a bit expensive, but no mother, I will manage. So funny part of it is Roger never got paid. And when we used to pull his leg, he would say, I've been paid in advance. Because he was also architectural consultant to Rothschilds. He used to drive a Porsche, sports Porsche. Very rich young man. And handsome. Somehow or the other, we became like fish takes to water. We understood each other. I don't know how it happened. So whenever I was in Pondicherry, in the morning we'll come to Aspiration, look at Auroville and so on and so forth, go back for lunch and so on and so forth. Then meet in the afternoons to gossip about what he has talked with the mother in the morning. So this was one line of activity that I was involved in. Other line of activity was the Auro service. And in fact, after mother's passing away, when problem developed with society, I created a trust called Auroville, Auro Service, the Auroville, as a managing trustee. Because I had the power of attorney to do everything. And we started taking up work outside of planning or modifying architectural cities. Roger was reluctant to begin with, but then he agreed. And during the period of 74, 75, we designed four cities: Salem Steel City, Kudremukh Iron Ore City, Vijayanagar Steel City, and a prospective capital for Haryana. The fifth big job was remodeling Faridabad. Two cities we developed in detail. They are there, Salem Steel City and Kudremukh Iron Ore City. They are there, built between 75 and 78. Each one of them, funnily enough, for a population of 50 to 60,000 people, the same as Auroville. In the meanwhile, Roger and his office in Paris, which by the way was a 3-storied building, employing someone like 100 people. In Europe, an architect's office employing 100 people in those years was something fantastic, because Europe was not expanding, but he was successful. So his first design was typically orthodox, a rectangular city. Brought the model to the mother. Then mother drew for him the 4 zones and the center. So then he came out with a circular design similar to a nebula. So mother was not very happy, but she says, you are on the right track, go ahead. Then finally he came up with a design that she approved. Although you don't want me to say this, but I would say this, it looked like a ever-expanding galaxy. And that is how it got to be known as a galaxy plan, whether the definition fits it or not. But detailing the layout of the city, it turned out that not only the city, but also the Matri Mandir that was thought of a little later, both are based on the mother's spiritual symbol. There's a center, there are 4 zones or 4 petals, then there are 12 other petals, both Matri Mandir and the city has a center where Matri Mandir is the focal point, but that area is called peace. The 4 zones that she wanted was residential zone, cultural zone, industrial zone, and international zone. And then the 12 aspects of the mother are the 12 radials. So as is well known that Indian spirituality has 3 aspects. Yantra, Mantra, Tantra. Yantra is what is manifested, Tantra is the design, and Mantra is what is that guides you, gives you the inspiration. So all 3 are present in both the designs. Most of the people don't recognize it or don't accept it. It's there. And also there's a constant struggle to modify Auroville to fall in line with what they call environmental spaces. We're still struggling, but that's how it is. So when I came back, finally mother gave me the consent to become an Aurovillian. Was on my birthday in 1973. In November, she leaves her body. And even at that time in March, it was not easy because physically she was suffering a great deal. So I happened to be lucky that on my birthday she was seeing people of birthday. But it took me some time. So when she passed away, I was in Assam in a place called Digboi, which is the headquarters of Assam Oil Company, some work of Aru service. My host woke me up at 6 in the morning to say, "Mother is no more." I wouldn't believe him till I heard the news on the radio. Tried to rush back, but unfortunately, I could not have lost darshans of her before she was given a samadhi. I came a little late. But then when I reached here and crying out, Nalini, who was a senior Sadhak, said, "Why do you cry? Because mother is always with us. Just concentrate and you'll find her." And I did. I did. So first few months I stayed in Pondicherry till a hut became available in Aspiration. And then my wife, I and my daughter, we moved into Aspiration. So my children, Vinny and Naveen, were already there from 1971. So never lived with us. They lived on their own independent lives. So that was it. So that was the beginning of my life in Auroville and direct involvement with planning and development, which continues till today.
Thank you very much,
Thank-
Pashi.
Thank you.